And I'm going to share the page. Okay. Hold on, let me turn off the sound here. All right, we are learning. We're holding in middle of chapter 80. I think it's the 14th class in chapter 80. And we are holding, we're going into the laws of other laws that are connected to the laws of Shabbos. So it says in law number 50, in law number 59, Asr lishbar oilachtoich kol davar she'eni machal. It's forbidden to break or cut any non-food things. So this is about keeping the Shabbos, so it's non-food related. One should not cut or break things. Aval mashu maichal, but if it's food related, afilu rak lebehema, even if it's foods for animals, not foods for humans, mutar, then it would be permissible. And therefore, he adds to that. L'chein, therefore, mutar lachtech kash. So therefore, one may cut straw. Lachtzais by shinoiv. Obviously, you have to be careful not to cause bleeding, but to pick your teeth. So the straw, because straw is an animal feed, so therefore you could rip it to sort of say to create like a toothpick. Or mutter limloil veliktaim kidei sorry, ve'atzim besamim. And if you have fragrant kind of wood, a wood that has a good smell, so mutter limlo veliktaim kidei lariach bem. So you could crush and break them so it should give off a good fragrance. Vafilu hem kashim kates, even if they're very hard, like wood. Avaliktam oisem kidei lachtes shinav oiser. But you may not break them to pick your teeth. We'll see why in a second in the footnotes. So as long as it's something food related, then it's permissible. But if it's not food related, then one should not break or rip or cut things. So let's see footnote number 172. It's talking about crushing the fragrant wood. It says only by hand and only to increase its fragrance, not to create its fragrance. So if there's already a fragrance and you just want to give a smaller smell, so the Magen Avram in 322.6 says then to kind of crush it a bit to give a better smell is permissible. 173, but we're talking about break them. So you may not break them. You might to break them to pick your teeth is not permissible. So he says, and not even edible for animals, because if it's hardwood and not edible for animals, you still could crush it to give a smell, but you can't or increase the smell. But you can't cause to make it into a toothpick. Okay. Yes, Aaron.
So cloves and I'll give you two things. Okay, so there's a plant that they cut, and then on Shabbos they pass it out in the Sephardic shuls. You could peel the bark, and then it would give off more smell. And a clove, you could crush it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so is it talking about, well, if it's already giving off a smell, and the question is to give off a stronger smell.
The reason you use it is for for Havdalah, to smell it, but you get it before Havdalah. You get it at the night service. So like you might be wanting to get a better smell or whatever, you could peel it or you could crush the cloves.
Yes, I mean, if you want to get a better smell, then he says that you can do it. But obviously, you have to be careful about crushing cloves in a way that it's, because here we're talking about trees, and there's a problem of turning things into powder and stuff like that. So that's even prohibited with foods with actual foods, like we learned before about crushing the salts or the peppers. You can't make it into thin like powder. That's doichen. That's its own prohibition on Shabbos. We're talking about something that wouldn't be turning it into kind of like a powdery small chopped
So
thing.
a branch, I could peel the bark off.
I would say that's what it seems to say that you can do, but we're not talking about turning into something into like taking cloves and turning it into like a finer powder. That's not allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're talking about the laws of trees, meaning to say the concern of trees obviously is essentially that if there's a tree, you may pick something off a tree. So therefore, it's a prohibition to be in contact, so to say, with the tree. So it says, "Ilam ben shu lach ben shu yavish." If the tree is whether if it's still green, wet, so to say, alive, or yavish dried out. Ein mishtamshin by shum tashmish. You're not allowed to have any use of the tree. We're talking about a tree that's in the ground. Ve'afa pi she'ein minidai, and even if you do not shake it. The imanida ibalavachi is shemuksa. To shake it is on its own a problem because then it's muksa. It's something that you shouldn't be touching on Shabbos. But here you're not shaking it, just touching it or climbing on it is ein oilim ba, you can't climb on it. Ve'ein nitlim ba, you can't hang on it. V'asir laniach alav eize chayfet, sorry, and it is it's prohibited to, it's forbidden to place any articles on it. Or to take from a tree, or likshar by behemoth, to tie an animal like a leash. And anything of the sort. And he says, and even the sides of the tree, we'll see more in the footnotes, is forbidden to be used. If there's a basket hanging on the tree from before Shabbos even, you can't even take something, remove something from within the basket. Or to place something into the basket from the outside. I mean,
Could
this
you
again,
use it as shade? Sit under it?
shade is obviously something different. You're not touching the tree.
No, but what if
It's,
you lean against it? Like sit under it and read a book.
sitting under is allowed, but not to have any direct use. The hasal have ilan, the basket is considered like a side of the tree. I mean, like a side, like let's say you have like a side of a counter on an oven. Aval im yase tikua be'ilim, but if you have a peg in the tree and on the peg, so to hang on the peg itself is prohibited, but on the peg there's already hanging talui sal, there's a basket. So then it's mutar little mitaycha litin litaycha. Then you can take from within it or place something inside it. We're not talking about the prohibition of placing something from a public to private domain. We're talking about, let's say, in your backyard where it's all a private domain. Mishum da oz havi hasal tzidit stadim, because then it's a side of a side. The peg is the side, and the basket is the side of the side. Vasal asir likach misham oilitles. Vasal, the basket itself, asir likach misham. You can't take the basket off the peg. Oilitles sham, or of course to hang it on. That's what we said before. You can't hang something on the tree. Mishum mishtamish b'yasod havet sideilim, because the peg itself is the side of the tree, so to say, like the counter side. All right, let's see the footnotes over here. 174. The problem of touching a tree is lest you pick fruits or leaves and leaves. This the Rabbanan prohibit the use of any trees. Again, we're not talking about sitting under the tree for shade. We're talking about using it because you may come and climb the tree and take off a fruit or leaves. 175 is, and even the sides of the tree is forbidden to be used. I mean, like we said, a side could be either a basket hanging on the tree itself or a peg that's on the tree. Sides here refers to anything stuck into or tied to the tree, the original thing that's tied. The real side of the tree is like the tree in all respects. So here we're talking about when you say side, it's like when I say counter, like a counter. Let's say you have an oven and you have a counter around the oven. So there's halachically also that's considered some sort of in some ways part of the oven. So here also the things that are connected to the tree directly are considered the sides. But a side of the tree meaning the side of the tree, which I'm not sure what would be the side and what's the front of a tree, but if you have something that you could consider the side of the tree, but it's the tree itself, then that's actually part of the tree itself, obviously. Okay, that's the ends of the
So
footnotes over
you
here.
think I'm thinking what because you're confused about what's the front and what's the back. I'm thinking the bark is the side and the
No,
front of
no, no,
the
no,
tree
no,
is
no, no, no,
branches.
because no, because branches and bark are no side of the trees. Whatever it is, he's saying that's not that. When we say the side of the tree, we mean an extension to the tree. So like a counter is an extension to the oven side. So here would be a peg or something, a rope that's on the tree itself, so that you can't, that's considered a side to
So
the
let me
tree.
ask you this. You said you can't touch anything that's hanging. If you have a bird feeder and it runs out of food, you have to leave it until after Shabbos.
Yes, absolutely. If the bird feeder is hanging directly on the tree, then that'd be a problem. Yeah. So then you cannot, because it's like a basket that you can't place anything inside or take it out. Now there's separate prohibitions about feeding animals on Shabbos. We're not going to get into that. But let's say, but in theory, as far as filling up the basket's concerned, yes, the birdhouse is concerned. Okay.
What if there's a storm? You can't do anything to the tree. You have to wait till after Shabbos.
Give an example. I'm not sure what you're saying. What do you
Well,
mean?
you know that we have hurricanes and then the winds, or you have tornadoes, and they knock over trees, and the tree is like half there, half not. Maybe it's still alive, maybe it's not. Are you allowed to touch it during, at the storm passes now, but it's still Shabbos?
No, no, no. You're not allowed to. If there's nothing that's connected to life-threatening situations, again, once you get into pikuach nefesh, things change. But if you're talking about something just that the tree fell on your car in your garage, you can't touch that on Shabbos. Okay, so let's now we're going to the laws of plants, right? This is more sometimes more practical to people. Where can you move a plant, a plant in a basket on Shabbos? So first of all, I just want to go into one law. We know there's what's called a there's if the plant has a opening on the bottom, so it's nakov. So then it's obviously there's earth touching earth. That's just usually more a concern in a lot of laws of Shabbos than a basket or a flower plant, a flower basket that has no hole inside. But here we see he seems to put them both in the same category. Kli shizarim boy mine asavim oy sheishanim lenoi oy lahayriach. If you have a vessel, like a plant vessel, is used for planting herbs, roses, and the point is for their beauty, fragrance, etc. Asa litla you can't pick from the plant on Shabbos. Let's say you wanted to take for spices, etc., rosemary, whatever. Kamaisha asa litla and just like it's forbidden to pick from a tree. So you can't touch anything from a plant, from a potted plant. Now you have to be careful for something else. If the potted plant is on the earth, you can't move the potted plant from the earth. And place it someplace else. Because while it's on the ground, I mean, when we say here ground, I mean the earth, is meireach haaretz gadol. It's kind of growing it nourishes from the aroma of the soil, and it's like you're plucking something on Shabbos. So disconnecting, moving a potted plant on Shabbos, you're disconnecting it from the ground. We're not talking about flowers that are in a vase on the table. So oimid ala karka mireach haaretz hu gadol. So if you're removing it from the ground while it's in the pot, havik mai toilesh, then it's like you are plucking it or removing it, unearthing it. And the same thing is in the reverse. If it's on a countertop or non-earth, by placing it on the earth, because it connects to the, so to say, the reach, he calls it, it's the aroma of the earth is mishum reah. So then it's like you're planting the potted plant. One should be careful in this whether the basket, so to say, the plant, the potted plant is in a wood receptacle or if it's earthenware. Cheres. Bein shu nakov, bein sheni nakov, and here he says whether has a hole or not a hole. It means even if it doesn't have a hole, you would think there's no direct connection between the earth and the plant. So then you're by placing it. So then maybe because like I said, halachically, there's a difference in if it's nakov or not. Because nakov, it's like in the laws of shmita, the laws of other laws of things that are connected to growing. We have the difference between a plant that has a hole in it or not. But it says when it comes to Shabbos, one should be careful whether there's a hole in the plant in the pot or not. Hold on, Aaron. I'm going to first do the footnotes on this. 176 is talking about not to be moved from the ground and to set it in another place. So you can't remove it from the ground to be placed out off the ground. For example, to set it down on some object or platform is prohibited if you're taking it off the ground. But from place to place on the ground, it's permitted to move, let's say to drag a potted plant that's on the earth, so you're not really removing it from the earth, so then it's permitted, he says. The Pri Megadim, as quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, rules that there may be a violation of muktzah if it's moved. So the question of muktzah, something that's muktzah again, is something that's prohibited to be touched on Shabbos. So here the question is not about moving a potted plant that's you're unearthing it because you're dragging it on the earth, but here the problem is that it shouldn't be moved because of muktzah. So that's quoted by the Pri Megadim, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Pri Megadim on that, which is one of these are all commentaries on the Halach on the Shulchan Aruch. 177 is about placing a potted plant on the earth. So then it's like planting. So he quotes the Bir Halacha, which is again another commentary, says, if you only intend to leave it on the ground a day or two, or if it's dry there and not fit for growing, you may place it there. The problem of muksa mentioned earlier, however, remains. So here he says that not if we just for a second forget about the question of muksa, which is quoted by the Mishnah Berurah quoting the Pri Megadim, but just the question of planting or sort of say removing a plant. So if you're placing it on dry earth or it's only there for a temporary amount of time, the Bir Halacha says that's not enough time for, so to say, the fragrance of the or the aroma of the earth to have an effect. 178 is talking about whether it's a pot that has a hole or not. According to Rashi, Tosfos, and the Shulchan Aruch 3.1.12.3, even when the vessel has an opening, it is a rabbinic prohibition. However, Rambam maintains that it would be a deraisa violation. According to the Rambam, once it has a hole and the earth touches the earth, then it's even a deraisa, it's a biblical issue, not so much rabbinic. Whereas the Rashi, Tosfos, and the Shulchan Aruch hold that a potted plant, even if it has a hole, so this, so to say, earth touching earth or close to touching earth, it's rabbinic and it's not biblical. It's not considered biblically planting. Yes, Aaron.
What about hydroponic? Is that
Explain.
her?
Which is what? Explain. I'm not.
Okay, so I'm not going to explain every single plant, but just in the Jewish world, they do hydroponic planting so that you have less bugs to deal with in the kosher world for vegetables. So they grow it in the water.
They grow it in. Sorry, say that again. The water.
They grow it in water so that the bugs aren't such an issue, and you can get kosher food. And the foods that would be riddled with bugs because they come from the ground, they don't come from water. So they grow a lot of stuff in a greenhouse with hydroponic, which is they
Uh,
grow in like lettuce in water. Okay.
yeah, that's a problem. If that's a method of planting. If it's a rabbinic or biblical, but it's definitely a method of planting that's prohibited on Shabbos.
No, but I'm saying all the rules you said, moving, taking out.
Okay, first of all, the fundamental idea of muktzah applies to all these things. Muktzah is something that shouldn't, it's not meant to be touched on Shabbos, so, and that applies to anything. That would apply to this as well because it's something that you do in the week and you're not supposed to be doing it on Shabbos. But as far as the question of growing goes, I don't want to say for certain, but from the little bit I know of that, it would be similar problems with placing it on the ground. First of all, placing it on the ground doesn't mean just because it's being grown that way doesn't mean that it wouldn't be affected by being placed on the earth, etc.
Okay.
Asir lichtoi velasas ezitzir, the one who learns Tanya today, right? Tanya is talking about the idea of tzedakah, of charity, of zereah tzedakahs matzmiach yeshuais, that's the power of the earth. So again, the power of the earth is there, and if you connect, the power of the earth is the power to grow. So if you're going to connect something that grows, especially something that usually grows connected to the earth, so by placing it on the earth, even if that's not the method you're doing right now, but by placing it on the earth, it's going to be that connection between the power of growth and the thing that's growing. Okay. Asher lichtoi velasas ezit seer afilu be'etzboi im hamashkin shal hashulchan or hahevel shal chaloin zechuchias, right? So all children, you go in the winter and you're walking by a car that has frost. So you want to draw on the frost. So it says it's prohibited to draw even on frost or dust for that matter. So asher lichtoi velasas ezit seer, you can't write or make a so to say a picture with even with your finger on, let's say, liquids on the table or hevel shalchalon is chochias, or if there's condensation or if there's dust shimsha sachaloin V'chein v'chol davar, it doesn't make a difference how you do it, what it is. You shouldn't make any drawings or writings with anything. Alpha pishein miskayim, even though it's only temporary, it won't last, right? It's just frost. Afil las isroishim ba'oma b'tziparnoi al eze davar l'simon, even to use your fingernail to make a rishima aroishim, to make a mark as a sign, it's prohibited. Nimsa shaiva kedem mishinatfa ala sefer. And he says, if wax or something similar is found on a book, let's say, those days, if they used candles to look at books, so the wax would drip down. Afilu rak al ois achas, even if the wax only dripped on one letter, what you can't remove it on Shabbos. It is forbidden to remove it on Shabbos from the writing on Shabbos. We'll see in a second why. Yes.
If you can't write on dust and on frost and stuff like that, can you remove it completely so you can see out the window or from your table?
That's a good. I mean, that would fall into other questions about the condensation. But let's see, dust without condensation. It's a good question, but that's different. I mean, that's definitely not here. We're talking about creating letters or shapes. Over here, when you're removing it, you're not creating letters and shapes. We're not talking about, if the condensation is wet, and then we have a question of before, like we had of sponges or maybe disposables are permissible. But that's a good question. That Mr. Albee would fall under what would be permissible. Anything, he says over here, anything used as a sign is considered writing. So here the issue is writing, but by clearing dust from your windows, that's not writing. I mean, that would say, in theory, that applies also to kind of if your glasses fog up, you know what I mean? So there's, I mean, it's smaller, it's not a window, but it's still your glasses. So if your glasses fog up, obviously you're not writing on it, you're just clearing the fog. Okay. He continues. Samach Gimel 63. Just like it's prohibited to write on Shabbos, it's prohibited to erase on Shabbos. Whatever has been written. Okay, you have cakes, birthday cakes. That you make letters or shapes. It's permissible to eat them, and while you eat them, you're breaking them on Shabbos. But if it was made to charm the children, we'll see again in footnote number 181, like a birthday cake, so you should be more careful. Okay, there's a lot of laws about this. I have a little bit of a document on that we're going to go to in a second about letters, but let's just first see the footnotes over here. He says,
But just to, at least in Brooklyn, probably in Israel, probably all over, they take a piece of chocolate and write on it so they
yeah,
can just remove it.
remove it. Yeah. We spoke about that last week. So here it's talking about broken and eaten on Shabbos. The Degel Mirvava, again, a commentary, Ramah prohibits this unless the letters are made from cake itself. Okay, so then it's part of the food. The Mishnah Berurah is lenient when the letters are written with fruit juice, like a kind of frosting. But if it is written with with fruit juice. But if it's written with frosting, you should not cut or break it in the place of the letters, but you may bite into it in a normal way of eating. Means if you have a piece of birthday cake, according to the Mishnah Berurah, and there's frosting with letters on it, so to bite into it is one thing. To cut is different because then you're separating the words that's like cutting words. Biting is the way you're eating it, and it happens to be that you're eating a word. It's not cutting words. It's
So
not the
what
same.
about alphabet cookies?
Aleph bet cookies, like you mean
You
the
get them for
actual?
kids like ABC, but alphabet Gimel cookies.
Oh, you mean the actual cookies is a letter?
Each cookie is a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, or you can buy English alphabet.
Yeah, that because then breaking it with your hands would be different than just chewing it. That's what he's saying over here. The Mishnah Berurah says if you're just biting it with but here also you have to remember that that's a question of frosting or fruit juice as writing. But if it's the cake itself, that's like the cookie. So the cookie is the cake itself is different. So that would be like the alphabet cookies would be like the cake itself. And so he says like charm the children, meaning to say like a birthday cake. I'm going to bring this up again. I'm not going to stand by its every word over here is accurate, but just to give us an idea if it pops up. All right, so cutting cakes and foods with writing on Shabbos. Let's see if the file's moving properly. Okay. Halachic background, the malach involves, the issue comes from erasing by breaking the letters, one of the 39 malachas, and sometimes writing. Okay. Writing on food, like icing words, is considered writing midrabanan. Erasing that writing by cutting through it can be moichik, which means erasing midrabanan rabbinic. Even if your intent isn't to erase, if it happens as part of your eating, it's a concern discussed by poskim. Like we said before, depending how it is, if it's the cake itself, it's the frosting, if it's the fruit juice, if you're biting into it, if you're cutting into it, etc. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Harav, and Aruch Chaim 340, 17, 18, 344, and 5, writing or drawing on food is included in the Gezerah of writing, but it is the Rabbanan, as he writes again, it's only biblical. That's our rabbinic. Erasing such writing is also midrabanan, even without intent to write afterwards. It means you're not erasing so you could rewrite. Okay? If you break letters, because then it's a question of soser. If it's soser, amenas livnais, if it's just soser. Destroying is different than destroying in order to rebuild. So if erasing in order to rewrite is more of an issue than just erasing. If you break letters when cutting a food, it is forbidden if done in a normal way, since you are directly erasing them. However, indirect erasing, in other words, biting into a cookie with writing, like Aaron, you asked, is allowed, since eating it at the normal derech, achila, that's the way one eats. Derech achila means that's the regular way, and not considered an act of erasing. Cutting between letters is allowed if you avoid cutting through them. Okay. After the Alter Rebbe's practical outcome, you may not cut through the letters of icing or embossed chocolate. You may cut between the letters or serve it whole and let the people bite into it. Okay, so that's pretty much what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says. He quotes 62, he brings down the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch of our law that we just learned. Cutting letters of pictures on food is also midrabanan because it's erasing. It's prohibited rabbinically. Even though the writing is edible and your goal is to eat, the erasing is still prohibited if it's done with your hands and a knife. If the letters get erased when you eat them normally, biting, it's mutter because this is derech achila, so this is the same what we just learned before in the Alter Rebbe. Don't cut through letters, either cut between them or break the cake in a way that avoids letters destruction, or simply give whole pieces with letters for people to bite. He quotes Rabbi Farkash also says cutting through edible letters or pictures on Shabbos is also midrabanan due to moichek. He quotes again, even though the purpose is to eat, it's still considered prohibited aser, prohibited to erase, I think, if done in the normal act of cutting. There's a heter to say, I'm not interested in the letters. The act of cutting them is the issue. Okay, there's no heter to say. Sorry. Mutter, cut between the letters, remove the part of the cake, like Aaron said, if you have the letters on a plate before Shabbos, or cut it before Shabbos, serve it whole and allow people to bite into it. He says, picture same rule applies cutting through the pictures like erasing it. All right. So this is basically what we've just learned, put into a nutshell. Okay, let's continue. So basically, Aaron, your question about the alphabet cookies, if it's just eaten normally, that's okay. 64. Sfarim, if you have books, Shalchude, I don't know people if you guys remember this, but they don't do it anymore. But there used to be that the outsides of the books had a ink kind of stamp that was done, I guess, and when you open and close the book, you create or open a picture, right? Or writings. You could have sometimes letters. I don't know. I remember Sfarim that used to have that back in the day. I don't think they do it anymore. But they used to actually coat the paper. If you put all the paper together, like a closed safer. So if you have a safer over here, so they would have on this part over here stamped a design or letters that when you open and close it, you're creating or erasing the writing, right? He says, if let's say you have Svarim books, that on the outside of the books, and you put all the pages together, there's letters. There's opinions that it's prohibited to open or close the book on Shabbos, because you're either erasing or creating letters. There are those who permit it. V'chein noigim, he says at the end, he says this is the custom that whether to be lenient in this. Mikol makim, nevertheless, mi'acher sheish oisrim yesh lem noim lichtev kain. He says because there are those who say that one should not do it, it's a prohibition. So therefore, better not to have such svarim that you're creating. But I remember this back in the day. There was that's what they did to the svarim not too long ago. Okay, footnote number 182. Also, if you have another similar sefer, you should use it rather than use the one with the writing. So the Mishnah Berurah says that if you have an option, you have a chumash or another sefer that you could learn that doesn't have the writing, so choose that one better than the one that has the writing, even though the Shulchan Aruch says, the Kitzur says it's permitted, but because there are those who say it's prohibited, therefore it's better to not do it. If not, if you don't have another sefer, at least open and close it with your left hand, says the Eli Rabbah, do a shinoi. Left hand, obviously, if you're righty. If you're righty, do it with your right hand. So obviously, do it with your weaker hand means show a shinoi. You're not doing it regularly, just like you wouldn't write or erase with your left hand if you're a righty. So too, this is kind of doing it in a non-regular way. Okay. Halacha number 65. A person may tell your colleague, a friend, malili kliza afiluhu miyuchad lamida. Let's say you come with a measuring cup, and the measuring cup says 1 cup, 2 cups, etc. So, or 1 ounce, 2 ounces. So you could say, fill me up, although by filling it up, you're filling it up to a certain measurement. So measuring could be prohibited on Shabbos. Afiluhu shamoicher, even if it's not just a home measuring cup, but it's a seller's measuring cup, meaning he uses it to actually sell based on the volume of a cup or an ounce, etc. So in this case, he's just filling it up and you're taking it and bringing it home. So even if you're going to a seller and you say, just fill me up this cup and you're taking it home, it's permitted on Shabbos. And even more so, if you walk into, we're talking about a shop that's in Yerushalayim. I put up another chart for this because there's a lot of this. There's certain places where there's an Erev, let's say. Obviously, you have an issue of carrying. But if let's say you're permitted to carry in the space, let's say it's in a chotzer, there's a shop in a chotzer, and people go to the store on Shabbos and say, I'm out of sugar, fill up this cup of sugar. So even if you're using the owner's cup for sugar that traditionally he would sell based on those measurements, you just take the cup and walk out and kind of figure out the compensation after Shabbos. Or if you come in with your own cup, he says, obviously, fill this up. It's permitted. But if let's say you come in with a cup and the seller of the shop, right, fills up his traditional measuring cup and then pours into your cup, like it looks like clearly like there's a sale happening, then it's prohibited. V'chein, that's law number one. V'chein, what there's so too, it's permitted to tell your friend, Tein li chamishim egoizim v'kadoima. Give me 50 numbers. You're giving a specific number. Give me 50 walnuts or nuts, etc. So as long as you don't mention any measure or money, you don't say, give me, 16 ounces, but you say, give me 50 nuts, but you don't mention obviously how much it would cost. So v'gam lo yasa cheshbon, obviously you don't make a calculation as if there's a transaction happening over here. Loimer hayesh lecha biyadi chamishim egoizim ten li oid chamishim lecha biyadi meya. For instance, to say, I have 50, give me another 50, and now I have of yours 100. Kind of you're making in a calculation, reminding each other how much you owe them to repay them of that 100 peanuts. Mikol shekain shel yasku lashemecher. Don't use in any conversation any term that's connected to sale. Even if it's not about money, but there's some side of I owe you. Even if what you're doing is for Shabbos use right now. Even if it's even if it's for Shabbos use. Now he continues. What about with the Gentile? So it says it is forbidden to make a purchase on Shabbos even through a non-Jew And the same law applies to renting an article on Shabbos, even through a non-Jew. Okay, so the question really comes into the situation of where, again, there are shops till today in Yerushalayim where people walk in and walk out, non-Jewish shops, they'll walk out with something. So it's not so simple because there's a transaction happening, even if you're not mentioning anything. If the person's writing it down and billing you, then it's a problem. But there are methods of how it's kind of permissible, where they have like canteens or other stuff on Shabbos, where they figure out there are ways to make this permissible. Hold on now, and let's just do footnote number 183. Even if you give him the money in the beginning of the week, it's prohibited to have any kind of transactions on Shabbos of sale. Yes, Aaron.
There's a shop called, Amazon's online, but they do have a shop. So you walk in, it takes your picture. I'm not saying you would go in on Shabbos, but similar concept to you. So you take something off the shelf and then they just charge your account.
And
That's
that's surely
Yeah, I
not
didn't think it was permissible, but I just wanted to check.
yeah, that would definitely be an issue. Let me just see. There's a chat here.
Why would anyone want to go to a store on Shabbos? You should have everything before Shabbos, even
What?
in Israel.
It happens all the time. Okay, let's see
We
here.
just do without. In Brooklyn, my wife and me just do without if we forgot.
Yeah, there are scenarios where that's needed. Okay, let's see over here. Let's just go through quickly the rules of buying on Shabbos. Again, I'm not taking, not everything here is 100% accurate. Business transaction, buying, selling, renting, lending, or borrowing are forbidden on Shabbos. Shulchan Aruch 323.1, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch 323.1. Even speaking about transaction is generally prohibited. Sicha shachol. If you talk about any kind of business on Shabbos, is prohibited. We don't talk business on Shabbos. We all know that. The prohibition is rabbinic exer, lest one come to write down the deal. So the problem that we're concerned about transactions, that it may cause someone to write down something which that's prohibited on Shabbos. In Shulchan Aruch Siman 9098, says clearly, also Shabbos is forbidden to buy and sell on Shabbos. Even to say, I will pay you after Shabbos is not allowed. But if food is needed for Oneg Shabbos, one may take from a store without formal buying on condition not to mention paying and to settle after Shabbos. So that's what he was really talking about this in this halacha that we learned. That you're kind of walking into the shop with a measuring cup. You're taking a cup of salt or sugar and you're not saying anything, but after Shabbos, everyone knows that you're going to come and pay for what it costs the cup, as long as there's no kind of formal transaction happening, or if he's measuring his cup to see that it's only a cup and pouring it into your cup. But if you just take the cup of the owner and walk out with it, or to bring in your own cup and fill up, that's permitted on Shabbos. He says if it's for Oneg Shabbos, if it helps with the Shabbos, and kind of you'll settle the account afterwards. Example, you can walk into a Jewish or non-Jewish store and take challah or wine, as long as you don't say I'm buying after Shabbos, you work out the payment. Okay, that's kind of what happens in these shops, where the person walks in, takes something, and there's a level of trust that there is between each other. Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the same as above, on no buying, selling, even speech. One may take food on Shabbos from a Jewish storekeeper for Shabbos needs, as long as no mention is made of money, debt, or and the shopkeeper does not keep written accounts on Shabbos. Now, what about a non-Jewish store? If you just take and he gives without mentioning money or credit, technically permitted, but practically many poskim forbid, since in a non-Jewish shop, the practice is that they record debts immediately, which is what you would talk about the Amazon, etc. Chash ketiva, and maybe you're causing him to write. Okay, but again, there are non-Jewish shops that I see people doing it, maybe because they've worked out in a way that's permissible. Let's see what Rabbi Farkash says. Very strict about uvdin lechol and chash ketiva. He explains, from a Jewish store where it's common that the grocer gives on trust to regulars without writing, one may take on Shabbos for Shabbos needs as long as no payment terms are spoken. From a non-Jewish, it is generally forbidden since he writes everything down right away, which is psik resha, that he will write. Meaning psik resha means when there's something that's so sure Like we said, if you cut off the head of a chicken, the chicken will die, right? You can't say, well, I'm cutting off the head of the chicken and I'm playing a game. The chicken dies, maybe it does die, maybe it doesn't die. But if you take a head off a chicken, it's going to die. So hold on, Barbara. So too, Rabbi Farkash seems to say that in the case where there's literally psik reisha, it's like certain he's going to write it down, one should not do it. Generally, he uses the word generally forbidden. Let's just finish the next statement, then we'll get to Barbara's question. In an emergency, no food for Shabbos, for instance, and you have nothing to eat, he allows relying on leniencies if one does not speak of buying and one knows the non-Jew won't write, but l'chatchila asr, he says better not to go into a shop. So Rabbi Barkash is more careful. I guess those who go into the shops that I've seen are relying on the more lenient opinion. Yes, Barbara.
So what I'm understanding is that in in Jerusalem, shops will be open on Shabbat. They don't conduct business. If people want to come in and take stuff, there's with the understanding they're going to come back and settle that account after Shabbat, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, and I haven't seen actually kosher shops open in Shabbos. Could be there are in certain places, but it's more kind of those who are relying on the non-kosher shops. There's a clear shop that I don't know if it's still open, but in the old city that people were the entire time walking in and out on Shabbos, taking obviously things that you could open on Shabbos, whatever that they needed for the Shabbos,
Okay.
water, drinks. Okay. Again, I know there's like a canteen, like in camp, let's say. So in camp, you have like a children's camp. So you have the canteen that's for pay. It's not a free, it's like a store basically, right? So it's a canteen. So usually what they do for the kids is they have the children, sure, Panina, I'm seeing your messages here. So anything you
Yeah.
have to say?
No,
You
so
like,
I about Yerushalayim. I remember being in Yerushalayim and there was a place with a lot of bread or something like that, or other things that they were selling, and it was basically on the honor system where there would be let's say something like a little container to put the money in, and then there was things that people were selling, let's say it was bread or whatever it was, and people would put in the money. So I guess what they could do is, let's say, take whatever it is and then come after Shabbat and put in the money. It was basically people were sort of trusted to pay for the stuff on their own, and the stuff is just there.
but that would be even more permissible because there's no shop
Yeah,
owner that's watching.
yeah. There's no
Here we're
because
concerned that someone's going to start is going to write it down. But if you're talking about a total trust system, that today I just have in shows now also we have snacks, same thing. People leave out snacks by the coffee machine and say, please put in 10 shekel or 5 shekel, whatever it is, and take a snack. And that's usually, and there's no one's holding you accountable if you don't. But usually people pay. So then in such a situation, if there's snacks that left out on Shabbos, even though your intention is to drop in a quarter or a dollar after Shabbos, that's permissible. So yeah, so that was, I mean, so the canteen, back to the canteen for the kids. So usually what they'll do is they have, let's say before Shabbos, they have a list of products that the children sign up for, and so then it's already pre-decided. But they also have sometimes a situation where the canteen is open and some of the staff will go in there, or other kids go in there and take things that have not been pre-decided. And I know that because it's they did have some sort, I'm not sure the basis of the heter, where they had some sort of pre-cut out, let's say dollar 50 cents that gets thrown into, so to say, people's files. So I guess somewhere or another they've discussed that wouldn't be, even though that's like very much a transaction. I'm not sure what the basis of it is, but I've seen that happen. All right, let's see from how Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe Orach Chaim, he says that the problem is not the essence of credit, but that usually the storekeeper writes down the account. So that's a very important thing. That it just addresses the issue that I said. The question is not so much the credit as much as the writing. So where Panina, where you said about the idea of someone putting money into the honor system where you just put money, there's no one writing, that for sure doesn't have a problem because there's no one to write. But even let's say, but I was talking about the canteen where you clearly have a method that not writing by putting in a pre-amount, a kind of a number into a file. I also believe, I'm not sure, but I think people have something similar to that when it comes to Misha Berach on Shabbos. Like people make donations on Shul, where they say, I'm going to give $180 or $80, $50, $18. They have some sort of sign system that so people shouldn't forget.
Now,
If
you say that they shouldn't forget. So, like on holidays where it's the same rules as on Yom Kippur, same rules as Shabbos. So they'll have a paper clip, and you put the paper clip on, or you'll bend a indent. They'll say like $100, $180, $360, and
but
you'll
they're
just
mark,
bend it or put a paper clip.
but they're marking a number.
What do you
But
say?
they're marking something. There's a marking being made, not written, but
Yes,
a
it's
paperclip.
not
Yeah,
permanent because it's
yeah,
just a
yeah, yeah.
paper clip.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That could be the basis of that could be the basis.
That could be a mistake.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
But what about when, okay, so when people go up to the Torah, a lot of people like to give a donation. They may say, well, I'll sponsor Shabbos, or they may say, I'll give $101, whatever it is. No one writes it down, but they memorize it and they,
Okay, yeah, memorizing is something else. But here the question is that, like you said, some people have markings, like they'll have a paperclip on monies and something connected to someone's, or some other markings of for the garbage to remember, who did what.
so that's permissible or not permissible?
I get there are I've seen that people do markings, like I said, whether
My
it's in
shul does that.
the shul does what I'm saying. So it's obviously mystical, like he says here. Moshe Feinstein says the issue is not credit; the issue is the writing concern. So if you have if by having a system where you avoid the concern that maybe you're going to write because you've outsmarted it by making a system, so then it takes away the problem of the writing concern. That's kind of the thinking there. If it's a case where the non-Jew or Jew will not write, then it's mutter to take without mentioning money. Okay, without mentioning money. So that's what Moshe Feinstein says. But since in practice stores always write, that one cannot do so. For a non-Jewish store of Moshe rules, it is usher unless it's a special arrangement where the shopkeeper never writes, which is a very rare situation. Okay, so that's again maybe what's going on over here in these shops in Yerushalayim, where it's kind of really a major trust system. Kitzur is forbidden. It could be actually maybe I'm misreading the situation. It could be it's a Jewish-owned shop that just has a non-Jewish attendant. But I don't think so because they're selling to people who buy, let's say, Gentiles. Forbidden to buy. So Kitzur says forbidden to guy can take food silently from a Jewish shop, not from a non-Jewish. If he writes, Alter Rebbe same allows silent taking for Shabbos from a Jew, not from a non-Jew, if writing is expected, or Farkash forbids from a non-Jew. They always write. He doesn't trust him. Only lenient in emergencies. Ramosha Feinstein, same forbidden if there is any chance of writing. Only if you're 100% sure no writing will take place. Again, your issue, Aaron, of walking into Amazon, and I think my brother Shmuley, who's one Chabad Shluchim on Amazon in Seattle, he was in touch with the guy before they actually put that out. I think the first trial shop was in Seattle. The technology, but there is basically you have some sort of, whether it's your phone or something, that is causing that it's electronically kind of recording all transactions.
Yeah.
Uh,
But now my question is this. So you're saying Jerusalem about this buying and not writing it down. But if you're a Jew and you go into a Jewish shop, he can't be in the shop. No one can be in the shop who's Jewish because they have to take the day off.
Yeah, but we're talking about like the shop is open in such a way that it's not a business, like I said, like it's a canteen or something where they're just you walking in and taking it, or you need something. He's not open for business. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't believe that. I think the shop that I'm referring to in the Old City is a Gentile-owned shop, but
You're
it could
saying like a Muslim owns it.
a Christian, I think, but it's that doesn't make a difference. But it's saying, but the it could be that the reason they're allowing it is because they've really worked out a system where the person is trustworthy to absolutely not, where he writes over here like 100% sure of no writing. Okay. Okay, that's pretty much covers this question here. Let's go one more law. Mutter lema chaveroi. Malili ze oitenli boy ad haroisha mazeh l'mocher nimdan oisai nishkal oisai. It says you are permitted to say to a friend, "Fill me up the vessel up to for me, or fill it up until this, so to say, into this to this mark, and tomorrow we will measure it or weigh it." Okay, so this is kind of a little more than nothing, but you should not mention the name of the measuring vessel or factor or a fraction of it. Okay, the Ramah says Midrash Brura. All right, everyone, I'm going to stop here because the next is the hard questions of Boina, which we're going to learn about next week. Hold on, Barbara, to learn about the questions of opening and closing awnings, table umbrellas, other forms of building on Shabbos that could be a concern of building, which is, so it's better we'll start those laws next week. Yes, Barbara.
I was just going to ask, so when it comes to measuring, so like on Shabbat, Rabbi will ask us if we want a little bit of, like liquor or whatever to celebrate and do, a simcha. If I say just a little bit, is that a measure?
Okay,
Is that
but in this case, there's not a transaction. You're not paying for it. So
right?
it's here's just to say, could you pour me up could you give me half a glass of orange juice, let's say. So that's different thing. There's no transaction. It's just how much of this liquid you want. So saying a little bit wouldn't be a problem at all. The question would be if, let's say, someone has a bottle of whiskey that expects everyone to reimburse him or her at the end of Shabbos for drinking their l'chaim, then it would be another question.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That clears that up. All right.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. And those who haven't joined this week, hopefully we'll see you guys next week if you see the recording. Laila Tov, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome.